Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone, to our LinkedIn Live discussion. My name is Janine Yancey, and I head up Emtrain, and totally excited to have our discussion today. We're going to be talking about the power of demographic experience, which another way to think about it is just representation, and the power of story to move hearts and minds. And with me today is Dr. Amaliny Hasselbeck. Amaliny, thank you so much for joining us today to have this important conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So for folks, just a little bit of background on Amaliny. Amaliny is an entrepreneur, a blogger, and a social media maven, and certainly a lifelong advocate on issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so as we have this conversation about, I look at it, Amaliny, as we have an opportunity here to really move the needle, and how can we do so in the most kind of strategic, productive way? I think that your voice is so important. So I'm so excited to have this chance to chat with you about this.
Yeah, I'm too actually. So it's really important to have the conversation going about equity and inclusion. And I think it's a really nice opportunity to do that today.
Yes. So you and I were chatting about this topic last week, and you had expressed a concern that with everyone's focus on diversity, equity, inclusion being at a high point in June with the unfortunate death of George Floyd, your concern is frankly that we might see a tapering off and kind of a distraction. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on your concern?
Yeah, I think we had a momentum last year when with all the strong visual footage we had with George Floyd and what happened there, and with the whole BLM movement back then. But I feel like it's just like everything. I feel like it's slowing down a little bit, and like things are going back to normal in a way, which means that all the aspired changes which were supposed to be made back then are just slowing down in a way. And I think that's not how real change is going to happen. I think that's why it's important to keep this conversation going, and to make to have a significant impact there as well. I think it's that we at the moment we slowed down in taking enough action to change this kind of behavior and to change the situation ultimately.
So I think, especially right now, we're in the midst of this horrific pandemic, and the inequality on how this pandemic impacts people of different backgrounds and different demographics is very, very visible, I think, to everyone. So, I think that we do have, perhaps this is the silver lining in a really horrific situation. We do have an opportunity here, I think, to make a difference. And I think you and I both agree that I think it starts with representation. And I think about it more broadly as demographic experience, so people having direct personal connections and relationships with others from very different backgrounds, different demographic kind of experiences, so that you have more personal connection. And I'm going to ask you, Amaliny, to describe. You had shared a story with me about one of your first jobs, out of university, and that actually seemed to play a role.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm happy to share that. It was like actually, as you said, one of my first jobs after finishing college. And so the person who hired me, my manager back then, was a person who was disabled himself, physically disabled. And I think I was very fortunate to have him because like at that point, he wasn't just only like, first of all, I think one of the reasons I got hired in this predominantly like male dominated industry was because of him. And he hired me and also another woman who had also had an immigrant background, and kind of empowered us. He was a total mentor to us in a way, because he was like, he understood the problems we could face. He also saw our potential in there as well, because what he said was like, you worked, I bet you worked extra hard for the things, what seemed normal for other people maybe. And it was very empowering. It was like a very unique experience for me, because it was the first time that I was like, oh yeah, you actually are doing something good, and like, because as someone with an immigrant background, you grow up with this idea that you're not enough, you're not performing enough, you have to do more, and you just see that things are moving very, very slowly. And to just say it with my dad's word, for instance, my dad was always told me, like, if you want to be successful in the world, you have to be in Germany, especially. I grew up in Germany. You have to work triple as hard as the others, and that just stuck in my mind, like, in a way, this kind of this idea. And it was very hard when it came to the doing, of course, because I rarely get the appreciation like other people would have, like in a certain role position, which I don't want to complain about, but I think like the crucial part was like having a mentor, having people to relate to, who were supportive, that actually helped a lot in that situation.
And do you want to, so thank you for that. Do you want to flesh out a little bit the nature of that job and how it was pretty homogenous except for you? And I think you had mentioned one other kind of, other person just entering that workforce.
Yeah, so actually it was in the tech industry, and as you know, the tech industry is male dominated in a way. And also there was like a dominant culture, like how things are communicated, how the whole behavior is in the team and everything. And of course, as someone who has a different background, a different gender, a different cultural background as well, in a way, you don't really understand everything, you don't understand how this dynamic works, and they won't let you play with them, in a way that you cannot be, like, you are not at the table, even if you are physically there. It's just like you often feel excluded in a way. And I think that was the huge gap where, like as a single individual, you would have that issue that you would try to figure out, how can I make it work for myself? I mean, how can I just like connect with the people in a proper way? And it just really helped to have other people from marginalized groups in this situation, so that we could first of all support each other, and all of us like had a different way of understanding this, and we like we could approach the situation differently compared to as if we were like on our own.
So that certainly makes sense to me, and your kind of description of your manager, who is a person with a disability. And I think it's probably a decent chance that person also felt kind of excluded and marginalized, and that person had to overcome challenges that were not maybe present for some of his peers. And when I think of demographic experience, and this is why I think that I call it one of those power kind of levers, if you will, that as a society we can move, we can pull on, and as an organization, because we're here at Emtrain, we're focused on organizations and healthy culture, so that organizations can really push on. When you have demographic experience, meaning people that just that they have more insight perhaps into the challenges and the hardships and perhaps the inequalities that other, marginalized people face. And with that, and I'll refer everyone listening on this discussion today to Emtrain's website. If you go on our website, you'll see a tab called Workplace Social Indicators, because I think that that's relevant here, because with demographic experience, when you push on demographic experience and build it up, then you naturally get a nice corresponding bump in your ability to value differences, your ability to exercise curiosity and empathy towards others, and frankly, as you were describing, Amaliny, your allyship, your inclination to use. All right. So, John, perhaps if you could help us out. It looks like Amaliny is muted. Or perhaps I am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
I think John was trying to help us out and show these workplace social indicators. No worries, John. It's all good. But the idea is that as we really increase I think of it as like our health score, right? As we increase our health score in demographic experience and the ability to understand the hardships and some of the challenges faced by more marginalized demographics, then we get this nice corresponding bump in our ability to be an ally, to value differences. And I think your anecdotal kind of experience of your first-time manager totally illustrates that.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I think, I don't know, like if it really reflects the whole society, but in a way, like most people just tend to be with other people who are like them in a way. So that makes it, in a personal setting, you often don't have the exposure to people with a different background or from marginalized groups, or, people with disabilities, etc. And the more you just expose to them, the more you are able to see their issues, to see their problems. That's why people who are exposed to that are maybe more sensitive about these kind of issues. That's how allieships are built, because I fundamentally believe that humans are good. They just try to make good, and it's just like a lack of understanding in a way.
So I totally agree with that. It's blind spot. So actually, in our online respect course, our online preventing harassment program, we actually ask employees or learners right up front, do you believe that harassment is stemming from bad people or good people making bad choices and having blind spots? And 88% of learners, I just kind of looked at this stat the other day, 88% of our learners say it's good people making bad choices or having blind spots, not having empathy towards their coworkers. And what we're discussing here is really just kind of a nuance of that, right? It's people, as you said, people like to, I think, connect with like-minded and similar types of people coming from similar backgrounds. It's kind of like comfort food. It feels good. And that's a natural dynamic, but then the output of that is you get what at Emtrain we call, in-group, out-group dynamics, where you have, the power group who's in the majority in the position of power, and then you have outsiders that are really less empowered, that are feeling marginalized, and there's a whole bunch of equity challenges that are usually presented to those people.
Yeah.
So ideally, we have, and I think this is the one move that can have like so many like fringe benefits. We, in a very intentional way, make sure we have representation, and it could even be at least one person in leadership that we feel is sensitive and understands the less empowered demographics, right? Because then all those good things are going to ensue that we just described. However, the less demographic representation we have, then I think the other lever that we can push on is the power of story, which is what we were, referencing in the beginning. That I think how we change attitudes and certainly behaviors is we have to change hearts and minds first. And so it's the benefit of sharing stories to humanize people. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think it's a good point you're making there. I think it's a combination of both. That on the one hand side, that you have people who are representative for certain marginalized groups in a way, and also on the other hand side to have the storytelling to open people's mind in a cultural way, because as I said earlier, the people are maybe in their private setting not really exposed to that, and maybe they just have to learn it in a way. And I think even though it's like a very bad, a very unfortunate situation what happened in June, but overall I feel like the power of this pictures, these images, the video we have all seen, it doesn't leave anyone, I believe it's anyone untouched in a way, because it was it created so many emotions in people, and there you saw that how the people are willing to become allies to support this group and support change. And I think that's the power of storytelling behind it. And I think if you want to address this in organizations, should be a combined approach.
Yes, I agree. And going back to the reference to the George Floyd death.
Yeah.
I think I would just kind of describe it as as a society, we had, I would probably say, venture to guess, the majority of the white population not really understanding the extent and the pervasive nature of the inequity for our Black population. And as you said, there was no way to have any doubts after watching that experience for everyone to see. So we're all looking at the same exact situation and the blatant, inequity and horror of it. And it's hard not to be moved after looking at that. And I think actually the same type of dynamic happened in 1965 when, John Lewis, led 600 protesters peacefully across a bridge. And it was probably one of the first times we had TV coverage this is back in the 60s. And we saw, everyone from firsthand witness saw people getting beat up just for walking across a bridge. And what happens with that is it brings out the humanity in everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's the power of story, is bringing out the humanity in everyone.
Yes, I agree. And I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be those kind of stories, of course, which are horror in the sense, but also like everyday stories, So I think before, when we had a previous conversation about this, I shared the story about like how I was back then. I was volunteering in an Islamic organization in Germany, which were like with youth, with people, with teenagers basically, who were living there and who were still going to school. And they were second generation, mostly Turkish kids. And what they told me, like all of them, what they told me is like, we're going to go back to our country when we grow up. And I was like, you're second generation here. What is your country?
Right.
What is your image of your country? And, so this is like something which is portrayed, and this is like the whole image. You can stop the story there and you can just say they don't want to get integrated. They don't want to be part of a society, but that's not the full story. There is a reason behind it. There's a reason why they are this way. And, or why they have this attitude. So one of the things I discovered during the time I was working there was I was also tutoring them with their schooling things and like with their education. And they all went, so in Germany you have a school form where you have 4 different kinds of schools, and they all went to the worst form of school. And they were like all smart kids, like I went to the grammar school. So over there I could tell like, relatively, I didn't find that my peers were smarter than them, for instance, So I was like, it's like there is some sort of an issue going on. And I addressed that. I talked to some teachers. I talked to the director of this organization. And they said like, yeah, there is like an interest to keep some kids there in this school form because they are running out of kids. They're running out of, they have to close the school probably if that continues. And this was a group, it was the easiest for them to keep those kids there because they didn't have a lobby. They didn't have anyone advocating for them. And, if you just look at the full picture, it all makes sense. I mean, they don't get the opportunities they might deserve, maybe like from their personal talent in the society, and that makes them like to feel like not being part of it. That makes them to say things like, I want to go back to my country and all these things. So we always have to look at the full picture and just understand that these are all humans. And even these kind of stories, it doesn't have to be those big George Floyd or whatever kind of stories. Even these kind of stories are so powerful, maybe like to just understand, what drives people to do certain things. And
so I totally agree. And if that story that you just, shared was shared with the parents in that community at large, as a parent myself, it's hard not to respond emotionally. It's like, oh, we have some bright children. They need to be supported.
Yes. Yeah.
So sharing stories, it humanizes people. And I think when we have blind spots, it's because either we don't know, like we're just not aware of certain situations. Yeah. But then the other element or the other dynamic is because, as you said, people tend to congregate with people from their same background, same demographic. There's just no humanity. There's no connection there. There's no personal experience. And so the stories actually bring out the humanity and the emotional connections with people. And I think that, one thing that we can all do right now in this moment to actually start to drive change, because let's face it, I think our youngest generation, for the most part, I think what we're seeing is they want change. Everyone wants change. And it's going to take a sustained, I think, strategic effort from everyone to drive some change. And so, the power of stories, really can move the needle. And what we are recommending, what we do in one of our courses with clients that we work with, is actually there's a feature that enables people to anonymously share their diversity stories and some of the challenges that they've had to overcome. And there's nothing more impactful than somebody who has had a certain path, in life and education and their career, hearing about somebody that they work with. They don't know the person, but they know that they're in the same organization, who may have had a much more difficult path to get to the same place. That starts to open up your perspective and to appreciate some of the challenges that people have to experience that are not there for everyone.
Yeah, it's not even about the past challenges, like what they have experienced before getting to a certain place, but also what they're experiencing currently as well, because it's like an ongoing thing. And often just like for that person to be able to share it is like quite a relief, in a way that they're being heard. And on the other hand side, like also for the other party to just like feel it, to just emotionally connect to that situation and to that person in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to have as an organization kind of a shared reference and understanding that at least some people, in their organization have less support, less resources, and the consequences, they're working more hours during the week, doing more to get to the same level of output and outcome than some of the peers. And to say it in a way that's not, not blaming, not castigating, but just saying that this is my situation. It reminds me, PayPal actually did a promotional video. I saw it, this was a couple of years ago, and it was, I thought, really, really helpful, really insightful. It followed the journey of like 3 or 4 people that didn't have a bank account, so lower socioeconomic background. And it just showed a simple action of depositing a paycheck took these folks like half of a day. Whereas if you're in a different situation, you don't even have to think about it, right? So like just the sheer sense of how much harder their day was to do a simple errand that other people don't have to think about. I mean, that's the power story.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. And it also not just only just goes to marginalized groups, but also to people from different socioeconomic status as well. Like, I mean, the life turns out so different for them that their whole idea, it's not about, it's not about these these people are lazy or this or that, all these kind of things that you attach to, like to describe a person. That's not it. It's more about like in every, with every given social economic situation, with every given, other kinds of, I don't know, like if you're in a marginalized group or anything, that really changes how you experience the world, and that is what shapes you at the end, And I think I think this is only possible through storytelling, and I think that is something like organizations should like kind of make a core in their to have a frequency like that. They just once every couple of weeks or monthly or something, just have a place where people can actually share their stories, just to connect with each other and to just have a deeper understanding. I think overall that makes the organization more successful as well.
Oh, Amaliny, I love that actually. So, I think what we're saying here, just to kind of wrap up and sum up this conversation, certainly demographic experience and representation. And it doesn't have to be representation of every different type of demographic. It just needs to be somebody in a position of influence within an organization needs to have a sensitivity and understanding of this, situations of different types of people. That would be number one. But a second huge need is the power of story within society, but specifically within organizations, to even have, maybe it's even your social media team, once a quarter, or more frequently, if that makes sense, share stories from people within the organization, so that you're basically expanding the perspectives of all the members of the organization, and starting to really decrease blind spots. Yeah. Any other kind of final parting words of wisdom?
Actually, these would have been my final words as well. That it has to be a combination. In order to make a change, it has to be a combination of representation. That you have people who can relate to these kind of things, and on the other hand side, an option for marginalized groups to share their stories. To share these kind of things and make it available for the organization and for for the people, personally in a way. And I think this is a good combined approach in order to make a real change in a way. To give it a certain seriousness, which should be behind this kind of issue.
Super. Yeah. So I think with that, I'll put out a request/plea for everyone listening in, that lean in for next year, see what folks can do to change representation, and put together a process or a dynamic, so that we can have these stories, share these stories on a more frequent basis, so that we are not having the same conversation this time next year. We've made some progress. So let's hope that 2021 sees some progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion for all of us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with that, thank you so much, Amaliny. Appreciate your joining us today. And for everyone, thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Right. Have a good day, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.